Good evening. Welcome to the November 9th, 2022 meeting of the Planning Commission. We will now call to order at 6 p.m. Madam Secretary, would you please call roll for a determinant of quorum?
Commissioner Harlan.
Here.
Commissioner King.
Here.
Commissioner Lavelle. Vice Chair Fisher.
Here.
Chair LaPaglia.
Here.
Let the record reflect all members are present with the exception of Commissioner Lavelle with an excused absence.
Thank you. This time, Mr. King, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. Please stand. Right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. Madam Secretary, are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
Seeing none.
Thank you. I'd like to call for a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion made by Commissioner Fisher and second by Commissioner Craig Harlan. Public comments. At this time,
Do we have a vote on that? I had a motion and a second, but I didn't hear a vote.
yeah, let's do a vote on that. Good idea. Madam Secretary, please do a roll call vote.
Commissioner Harlan.
Aye.
Commissioner King.
Aye.
Vice Chair Fisher.
Aye.
Chair LaPaglia.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you, City Attorney. At this time, we will take public comment. Any person may address the Planning Commission on any subject pertaining to city business which does not relate in any item listed on tonight's agenda. Normally, no action may be considered or taken by the Planning Commission on any matter not listed on the agenda. Speakers would be limited to 3 minutes. Madam Secretary, do we have any non-agenda public comments tonight?
Seeing none.
Okay, thank you. Now moving on to the public hearing. Tonight's public hearing, consideration of a development code amendment to chapter 16.38, sign standards, and related land use tables authorizing billboards subject to a relocation agreement. Are there any members of the Planning Commission that wishes to abstain or recuse themselves from tonight's item? I could probably just take a head nod. Looks like none. We'll move on to staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Champarangsu, the Director of Development Services. So before you this evening, as you pointed out, we have a proposed recommendation for the Commission to recommend changes to the city's sign standards and use tables, which would create a process for the removal and relocation of existing legal nonconforming billboards through a relocation agreement process. So our recommendation for you this evening is that you open and conduct a public hearing, that you determine, in terms of a recommendation to the City Council, that the project is exempt from state environmental laws known as the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, under the Class 2 and Class 3 exemptions. So Class 2 has to do with the replacement of existing structures, which is what we're dealing with tonight. Also, Class 3 deals with the construction of new structures. So if the ordinance is passed by the City Council, for example, it is possible that existing billboards would be demolished and new billboards would be built in their place. So that's why we're using the Class 3 exemption. Also, we have a recommendation to approve a resolution recommending approval of Development Code Amendment DCA 2022-2729 to the City Council. So just by way of background, the city's sign code has a prohibition against billboards or the construction of new billboards since 1997. So that's when the city actually adopted its first sign code. Existing billboards within the community are considered non-conforming. So that means they received a valid permit, most likely while under the county's jurisdiction, and that they can continue and they can be replaced or repaired, but they can't be upgraded. So since the 1990s, the city has undertaken efforts to reduce or eliminate 14 existing non-conforming billboard signs approved by the county. And just a point about the number, we think it's 13 now. So our records aren't clear, but we think that's what the accurate number is. And you've got the definition of a billboard here on the right-hand side of the screen. You know, generally a billboard is intended to provide either on-site or off-site advertising. And that definition that you see on the screen is right out of the municipal code. So from a 2012 presentation to the city council, this map was included, which identified the 14 billboards. I understand from talking with other staff, as I indicated previously, that number may have gone down to 13. I couldn't tell you exactly which one that was, just because we didn't have enough permit information to identify that billboard that was removed. And just to cover the amendment for you briefly, as a result of the code amendment, the sign code would maintain its prohibition against new billboards. So we're not trying to allow new billboards to be constructed. Rather, we're providing for existing billboards to be relocated and upgraded pursuant to the approval of a relocation agreement with the city council. Relocation agreement is a defined term within the attachment that we've provided. Happy to go over that with you if needed. And then in terms of the locations of where billboards could be located, and we've provided the abbreviations here, but I'll go through them with you. It's the neighborhood commercial, community commercial, regional commercial, office research park, business park, general industrial -A, park and recreation, civic and institutional, and open space zones. And those zones generally reflect the zoning of parcels that are adjacent to the freeways, both the 15 and the 215. So generally speaking, you know, the red areas that you see are the commercial areas within the city, and the purple areas, you know, tend to be either industrial park, regional commercial, or the office and research park zones. And then obviously the green zones would be open space zones. So continuing on with the general description of the code amendment, again, only legally established billboards would qualify to obtain a relocation agreement with the city council. The amendment would allow digital or static displays. I'm sure the commissioners have all seen, you know, these state-of-the-art digital billboards, which have messages that update every 8 to 10 seconds. Obviously, static billboards, the traditional billboards we're all used to, would also remain to be allowed. And so in terms of an evaluation of whether or not a billboard would be relocated, the ordinance requires consideration of light and glare. If you recall, we have particular standards. We're within the Mount Palomar observatory area, which requires the city to pay attention to overspill of light and glare. Aesthetics would be another issue. Typically a billboard is a large pole with a large flat area on top. So we've depicted here from the city of Goodyear in Arizona what a more decorative approach to a billboard might look like that the city council could consider. The ordinance also requires the city to consider driver safety as well as distracted driving. Typically that can be dealt with through the control of the number of times that a message might repeat. As I indicated previously, typically that's about 8 to 10 seconds before a message rotates off the screen. The ordinance also requires that billboards be subject to a conditional use permit, relocation agreement, and or development agreement, depending on the circumstances of the property and the applicants. So the intent of the amendment is to reduce visual clutter, and the way that would be accomplished is as billboard owners discuss with staff and the city council the desire to upgrade their signs, one of the conditions is going to be that existing non-conforming billboards be reduced. So for example, the city council could establish a ratio that for every new updated electronic billboard that's approved, perhaps 2 would have to be removed. So we would see a gradual reduction of the number of existing billboards that we have in the community. As I mentioned before, it would eliminate non-conforming signage. It would facilitate the relocation and redistribution of existing billboards that may not exactly be in locations that were beneficial 30 years ago and need to be relocated to better serve the community under current conditions today. It would allow for the incorporation of modern technology, obviously, such as the digital displays. And this is the last bullet point here speaks to an issue that happened locally where the city of Temecula had to pay funds to relocate an existing billboard to accommodate a public project. So the ordinance also addresses that particular issue and would allow the city to negotiate the relocation of a billboard rather than a circumstance where the city might have to pay a billboard operator to cease using their billboard. So that is the overview of the proposed ordinance. So staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission open and conduct a public hearing and receive any public comments, find that the action is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to sections 15302 and 15303 of the CEQA guidelines as described in the staff report and the resolution. And lastly, that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the attached resolution recommending that the City Council approve the proposed development code amendment attached as an exhibit to the resolution, which provides that the development code amendment, chapter 1638 of the Murrieta Municipal Code would be modified to authorize the relocation or reconstruction of billboards subject to a relocation agreement. And then also the development code amendment includes corresponding updates to the use tables identifying the various zones that I went through in chapter 1610, 1611, 1612, and 1614. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll bring it to the commission for any questions to staff. Commissioner King.
The amendment still, you said it still has the provision that no new billboards. Curious why not allowing any new ones to be.
Yeah, certainly. So billboards have generally been considered to be not aesthetically, pleasing within a community. So when the city incorporated, back in 1991 and then subsequently adopted its zoning code, there was a policy decision that was made that new billboards would be prohibited. So we just wanted to make sure that we identified for you that the proposed ordinance carries forward that 1997 policy of not permitting any new billboards within the city.
And it's not a hard number as far as what there is currently, because you had mentioned that if there was someone was going to relocate one and do a electronic billboard, that there could be an agreement to take out 2 others that were older or something. There wouldn't be any way then to allow, if 2 were taken out to do a relocation of an electronic one, to put another one up somewhere else.
So there's, if I understand your question correctly, Commissioner King, so there's not a stated ratio. That was just an example that I was using. So, if the council decided it wanted to require, more than 2, it certainly would be within its power to do that under the proposed ordinance. So there's not a set number within the ordinance that, establishes a certain number of billboards. We're just identifying for you what the existing number is or was back in 2012 anyway. And so as the council negotiates with these billboard operators, the number of non-conforming billboards I expect would go down over time.
And for a relocation for a new site for one of these to be moved, that plan to move it to a new location goes directly to the city council, not to planning or anything?
Well, it depends on the circumstances of the property. owner and the billboard. So the language within the ordinance does require a conditional use permit. So under the zoning code, the conditional use permits go to the planning commission. So unless the city council, decided that it wanted to enter into a development agreement, my guess is that you would see, probably all of the relocation all of the billboards that went through a relocation agreement.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner King. Commissioner Harlan, any questions for staff?
Sure, just a couple. So on the static versus the digital, right? So as you're driving down the freeway, you see the static, okay, look up, boom, got it. Digital with the changing messages, right? You tend to kind of glance back and forth. Has there been any studies or findings or anything? Does digital tend to be more distracting than maybe something static? Or I would think within the time of, the frequency of how soon the message changes, I'm sure there's all kinds of algorithms there, but just kind of curious if anyone's looked at, is a digital billboard more distracting than a static?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a great question, Commissioner Harlan. So since digital billboards have become more common, well, initially, I think back in around 2010, we began to see studies related to distracted driving. And so we've seen studies on both sides. The topic, there's the, Outdoor Advertising Association, which went through numerous studies. There were various state transportation departments like Caltrans that had also engaged in these types of things. They wanted to understand the impact of this kind of a medium as they were seeing more requests to have them. So in staff's opinion, I think where the conventional wisdom has landed is if you don't rotate your messages more than once every 8 or so seconds, that creates a more safe condition where a driver is able to focus on a message for a couple seconds and continue on. So, but you will also hear arguments from safety advocates that it's just another type of distraction that creates potential hazards. But it seems like the 8-second rule has been working.
Got it. No, thank you for that. So converting something static to digital, there would be something in place to where it would be monitored or checked on to see if it was in fact an 8-second turnaround?
Yes, so these signs are like a computer, you can program them.
Got it.
So you'd be able to program into the sign how often it would change a message, and that's something that we'd be able to monitor.
Got it. So the relocation agreement that's proposed to mitigate the fiscal risk to the city, I admire that and applaud that. Currently 13 or 14 billboards in the city, according to the maps. Thank you for that. Is there a particular targeted number that the city or the city council is looking for, or is that kind of outside of the scope of what we're looking at?
Well, I think just point of information, I'm not aware of a overarching goal. This is in some respects a business proposition, not only for the billboard, advertiser, but also for the city. So I don't know if there's been a strategic discussion about, the number of billboards the city would like to see, reduced and then have upgraded signs in its place. So it'll just take time for, that to play itself out.
Got it. Then just last question. So is what we're looking to do here as far as this particular proposal, is this consistent with what our neighboring cities currently have relative to billboards, i.e. Temecula, Lake Elsinore, Escondido?
Sure. So I'm not familiar with cities in San Diego County, but the Wildemar to the north of us recently, I believe, had a digital billboard. I mean, at Scott Road, which is on the west side of the freeway, I believe. So clearly there's a direction that they've undertaken to allow this type of signage. Lake Elsinore, very similar. In fact, staff back in, I think it was 2000, I want to say 2014, there was a study that we had found in the planning archives where staff was studying what Lake Elsinore had done with the outlets and the digital signage that was approved there. Temecula, there is digital signage along with 15. I couldn't tell you how many. So it's clearly an element, that has been introduced with along highways within Southwest Riverside County.
Thank you for the specifics and the details. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Harlan. Vice Chair Fisher, any questions for staff?
Yes. When you refer to no new billboards, yet you're going to be building or get requests for new billboards, and they're going to be in a different location possibly, how is that not a new billboard?
So maybe a better description of that would be no additional billboards beyond the number that we already have within the community. So over time, you'll see the number go down, but you're correct. We would have new billboards in terms of the actual structure and the digital displays.
Yeah, I thought that was confusing when you say there's no new billboards, but yet the old ones are going to be replaced with new ones.
Right, but then you're correct, and I apologize for the not being clear enough. But over time, the number of billboards within the community will go down. Under this
Why would
ordinance.
they go down?
As I indicated, as the council negotiates with these billboard owners, they, for example, the example that I used was they may require for every new billboard that's in a digital or has a digital capacity, they would require 2 existing billboards to be removed. So that's how the council would achieve that goal of reducing the number of billboards within the community.
And why is it that 2 have to go to get 1?
That was just an example. I think that's part of that is an economic decision that the city council has to arrive at between with the billboard owner. So I'm gonna guess that the existing static billboards have an economic value for the advertising dollars that they bring into the operator, and that the digital model, since they're able to change the messaging, that probably has a greater economic value. So if you start to look at it from an economic standpoint, maybe a static billboard is worth 50. I'm just pulling numbers out of the air, but maybe a static billboard is worth 50,000, and a digital billboard has a value of 100,000. So if you make that an apples to apples comparison, you're pulling down 2 static billboards that have a value of 100,000. You're replacing it with a new billboard that has a value of 100,000 because of the ability to change the messaging. So I think that's a rough comparison that's fair.
Why is there an exemption of CEQA for the old one that will be torn down and a new one being built, not necessarily in the same location?
Just to clarify, the CEQA exemption only applies to the adoption of the ordinance. So the proposed exemption does not apply to future billboard construction. So when those new billboards are coming before the city council, there would have to be a new CEQA determination that would be applied in each case.
Yeah, I would think so. And
Yeah.
I was a little confused with that we're getting an exemption from it, but yet it's going to be a new billboard in a possibly new area.
It's only for the adoption of the ordinance, not for any new construction.
Got it. What cost is there to the city for any of the relocation of billboards or the new billboards being built?
Well, I'm going to say that there wouldn't be any cost. The interest of the sign company to upgrade their sign would require them to fully, fund, construction and equipment and things like that. So there might be, costs associated with administrative costs, with processing, but I don't envision the city spending any money on helping a billboard operator construct their billboard. I guess it could depend on the relocation agreement. Anything's possible, but I don't see the city being in the business of constructing billboards.
if a owner of that billboard is going to upgrade the existing billboard that they own, there would be no relocation, correct?
It's possible if they felt that the location of the existing billboard was the most beneficial,
Right?
then that might be a possibility, but it would still be subject to a relocation agreement. So they wouldn't have, there's no right given to a billboard operator through this ordinance that just automatically allows them to upgrade their existing billboard. They have to go through that relocation process, or, as I mentioned, the conditional use permit or development agreement.
So with this agreement, there's a possibility that we would go from 14 static billboards to 7 digital billboards.
Using my 2-to-1 example, that could be a possible outcome. It could be that the council, depending on the, I guess maybe the location of a proposed, relocated billboard, there could be a determination. Maybe the council wants a number greater than 2, billboards to be removed. I think it's just going to depend. It's going to have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. There's no set ratio in the ordinance.
Have we had any claims or any dissension about the existing billboards today from when they've been built?
Well, I'm not aware of any, but my tenure here hasn't been that long, as you know. But in going through our staff records, I mean, there's history going back to 1997 where the city had been at one time actively trying to reduce the number of billboards. So it's been a policy objective, I think it's fair to say, with the city council for 3 decades. And so we're finally able to get to a point where we're making a recommendation on an ordinance and an approach for you.
And why are we making the recommendation? Why all of a sudden now are we coming up with a recommendation for these billboards?
So my understanding, Commissioner Fisher, is that there was negotiations have been on and off with the advertising companies, as I indicated, for many years. And so there was a recent push, I want to say maybe 2019, 2020, to bring an item forward which would allow this process to be part of the municipal code. And so we've been working with the city attorney's office to create the ordinance and the process and the relocation agreement, and the timing is, obviously where we can bring this forward before you now.
The picture of the billboard that you showed us in Glendale, Arizona was a pretty nice looking billboard.
Yep, there it is. Let me turn back to that. So, yeah, I think that's, just an
Good,
example of a design that the city council could ask for as they negotiate these agreements.
Okay. So all costs associated with a new billboard being erected and the disposal of 2 old ones would be at the cost of the company wanting that billboard.
I would say that's a fair statement, that the operator is going to, the owner is going to bear all costs associated with removing and constructing billboards.
Because I see no budget for that at this point in time in our budget for 2023.
You're correct. There is none.
So we're assuming there will be no cost to the city.
Yeah, like I said, I think that's a fair assumption. I can't think of a reason why the city would participate in construction of a billboard unless it was for, community use. And I'm not aware that there's a budget amount for a freeway billboard.
Yeah, I don't think that they would stand for the cost of it right now, in my opinion. But what I wanted to ask is, are there any current requests out there for billboards, new ones being relocated or old ones being relocated?
Sure. Well, I know, and Mr. Agajanian is here, but in his role, he has been negotiating with Lamar, which is one of the largest billboard operators in Southern California, if not beyond. So his office has been working with them to essentially have this process, put in place negotiate the replacement of non-conforming billboards within the city.
And the 13 or 14 billboards we currently have, are those by outdoor, or are they part of Lamar, or is there another company involved in the existing ones?
So my understanding is that all of the billboards we have in the community are under the ownership of Lamar through the assimilation of contracts, ownership of other billboard companies. In some of the documents that I've seen, there were, I think, 2 or 3 other operators before Lamar became the proprietor of the ones that we have now.
So Lamar subcontracts?
I don't believe so. I think they've purchased the rights to the billboards that were existing within the community over time.
What happens if I see a billboard that says outdoor advertising? Because
Well,
there's a company called Outdoor.
sure. If it's possible that a billboard operator could sell their rights. I haven't seen a template of a relocation agreement, but sometimes you have requirements for the city to be notified when rights are assigned, to a different party when there's an agreement. So I believe there would be a notification to the city in the event that happened.
I mean, I'm in favor of really upgrading the billboards that are currently existing 10 years ago to current times. And that would include, more going into the digital aspect rather than the static.
Yep, I think staff sees this as an upgrade, for the community as well, to replace those old, unsightly 1970s era, billboards with newer designs like the one we had shown from Arizona.
One of my fellow commissioners asked if somebody would be monitoring the 8-second rule. Who would monitor that?
Well, I don't know that we would monitor it by having a staff person, stand out there, but I think in the programming, we would want Lamar to assure us that they're, setting the rotation of the message to be, 8 seconds or whatever that is. So I think there's a way to do that, but and obviously we could go out there and count, seconds, how often the billboard's message is changing, but it looks like Mr. Agajanian may want to weigh in on that comment as well.
I was so excited about the discussion, commissioners. Thank you for letting me to come up here and speak with you.
Welcome, Mr. Agajanian.
Thank
to
you.
Staff.
I was so excited about the discussion, I thought I would jump in if I could. So it's actually a 6-second rule, and it's monitored by Caltrans.
Answers the question. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Good presentation. And certainly it's something that I think we need to update for the beautification of the city.
Thank you.
And we're only talking about Murrieta, right?
Just Murrieta.
Not Wildemar or Lake Elsinore or any of those other cities that surround us.
Yeah, our ordinance only affects properties within Murrieta.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate my commissioners' very thorough questions tonight. Thank you, boys. But Commissioner Harlan, did you have a second question?
Yeah, sure. Just a comment on the static and the digital, just from my my professional life. So as a company, when you go to purchase a billboard, right, you're signing up for term, and whatever messaging you put up there, it could be thematic, right? It could be around a holiday or seasonal or something like that. So your term ends, and then especially if it's static, then it's resold afterwards to be replaced. Well, if somebody doesn't come along and buy it, your spot behind you, oftentimes your ad carries over a couple months, and you can have October and in January, and depending on when that turns over. So going to digital to keep things looking fresh and clean and neat is certainly an upgrade from what I've experienced.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more. Well, I had about 6 questions here, and through my fellow commissioners, they're all crossed off and answered. One I have circled here, does this affect the property owners that the billboards are currently on? If we reduce them, are we concerned about that?
Well, I'm going to assume Lamar has contractual obligations to those owners, and however the relocation process works out, there may be for example, termination or buyout, clauses, but that's an agreement between a private property owner and a private enterprise that we wouldn't
Sure.
be involved with.
It's good to hear that. It sounds like Lamar is the owner of all 13 billboards we have here. So just one person, one point of contact to work with. I imagine they're going to be in favor of reducing the number of billboards going digital. Not only are they expensive to build, I'm sure, but it's kind of serving the purpose of multiple billboards in one location, which I'm in favor of as well. I think the fewer billboards, the better. I think there's a lot of cities, Rancho Santa Margarita comes to mind, where they're prohibited in their city just because they're kind of an eyesore, may have you. But maybe a fair amount are necessary, and I like the idea of updating them and reducing them as well. And that's all I have, because everyone else asked the good questions. So thank you, staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. And I think we can kind of skip over the applicant, as we are the applicant, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So let's move on to public testimony. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments, starting with any opponents, or those neutral?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have public comments.
Okay, thank you. We will now close the public hearing, correct, at 6:33.
Deliberation.
Did we open the public hearing?
Deliberation.
No, I understand that, but did we open the public hearing?
You did. You didn't hit the gavel.
My bad.
It's okay.
Sorry, guys. Had a long drive home from Austin, Texas, yesterday and today. Anyways, we can bring it up to discuss, but I think we've pretty much probably discussed this plenty, unless there's any other further questions or deliberation. Mr. King looks like he has none. Commissioner Harlan, Vice Chair Fisher, looking good. Are we ready to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the attached resolution recommending that the City Council approve the proposed Development Code Amendment attached as an exhibit to the resolution. The Development Code Amendment will Chapter 16.38 Sign Standards of the Murrieta Municipal Code to authorize the relocation or reconstruction of billboards subject to a relocation agreement. The Development Code Amendment also includes corresponding updates to the use tables in chapters 16.10, 16.10, 16.11, 16.12, and 16.14.
Would you like to add recommendation 2 to that motion or not? The CEQA determination. If you look, if you're reading from your staff report, it would be recommendation number 2.
Recommendation number 2 would also to find the action is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to section 15302 and 15303, as described in this staff report and the resolution.
I'll second Mr. Fisher's motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, please do a roll call vote.
Commissioner Harlan.
Aye.
Commissioner King.
Aye.
Vice Chair Fisher.
Aye.
Chair LaPaglia.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously 4-0.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. City Planner, any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Just a note to our commissioners, we will be holding a hearing on 11/23. That's the same week of Thanksgiving holiday. Please let me know after this hearing if you have any other commitments for 11/23. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. City Attorney?
None, thank you.
No? Okay. Last time, back to the commission. Any comments before we close the meeting? No? Good. I hope to see everybody at the Veterans Day Parade this Friday. That's all I have. Everybody have a great night. This meeting is adjourned at 6:36 p.m.